So Julian is enough, but just for your curiosity, it is Zawistowski. Not that hard, I believe. So I would like to start with a question, like how many of you know anything about Golem? Like have heard about Golem? Some of you have. Have you used Golem by chance? Okay, there's room for improvement. And would you agree with a statement that we have a problem with the cloud services as they are today? Yeah, well, cloud is all right, judging from your votes. So maybe we should not have a Web3 summit here today. But I think that most of you will agree with some of the points I have on the cloud. Anyway, I think that a couple of years ago when we started working on Golem, we thought that we have a pretty good idea of what Golem is, what we envision, and also like what's the problem with the cloud we want to solve. And while I think that our original ideas in that regard are still valid, we also went through a lot of things over those years, and I think that also changed our perspective a little bit. And that all affected our why question, which I think is like the most important thing that motivates us, motivates you to work on Web3, on all those exciting technologies. Because, of course, we could oversimplify that in a Silicon Valley, like HBO TV series, Silicon Valley, that we do that to make the world a better place. But I think this is like a super oversimplified, and we really need to know why we are doing things. Before moving to that very important stuff, I will just tell those of you who haven't heard about Golem what Golem is. So basically, we think about Golem as about market for computing power. This is a three-sided market, so we have requesters. Those are people, entities that need a lot of computing power, need computing services, and they are renting computers times for providers, so those who have hardware and want to be the supply side of the market. Also, we envision that the developers will be able to join by monetizing their software on top of Golem. So this is basically a concept of decentralized cloud that everyone can join and run arbitrary universal computing in that cloud. And as that concept, this is in fact, let's say, off-chain project. So there is no blockchain directly involved in a computing. Right now, we use blockchain technology, more specifically Ethereum, to run the transaction system. So this is a market. So of course, you have to have some payments before those requesters and providers. And as this is a decentralized setup, then a decentralized transaction system provided with the token is a nice solution. Project is live. We started on Ethereum mainnet April this year. We are focused on batch computing, in fact, right now. So on the one hand, this is a little bit limiting, but on the other, like, hey, you can now render CGI rendering. You can make an animation. You can make a movie with the Golem network. Right now, this is possible. Coming back to the problem, as I said, we think about Golem as market, and I think that a couple of years ago when we started thinking about why we are doing that, writing our white paper, that market and solving price problem was in the center of our thinking. That was not the only thing, but that was the most important thing, because if you think about that market in economic terms, like how an economist would define that, it seems that what we are doing brings us pretty close to perfect competition situation, especially if you remember that perfect competition needs large numbers of buyers and sellers, that you need perfect information. Maybe we don't have perfect information with Golem, but we can have like good enough information to have like a perfect competition-like conditions, and so on and so on. So Golem meets that requirements of perfect competition pretty nicely, which means that in theory that brings prices down and can like break oligopoly, so close monopoly of a few guys, big guys who control that market right now. But as we dig into that and worked on the number of problems that we had and still have to solve building Golem, we understood that the price problem is not really where the real problem is. The real problem is about control, about who controls cloud and how the whole system works. Because at the end of the day, like no matter what you do, this is someone else's computer. Of course, on Golem, this is someone else's computer as well. But that's especially problematic with the cloud, and I will come back to that in a second. But let me just revisit like our original pitch from 2016 and tell you why I think that we need to change our thinking in that point. At least we have changed in Golem. So we believe that the fact that the Moore's law is dead or dying is important. Of course, cloud computing is an oligopoly, and that's important point. The fact that businesses are moving from in-house infrastructure to the cloud computing is also important thing in the context. And at the end of the day, like decentralized Web3 will need computing component, which also like is pretty appealing, obviously. And I could see from the previous presentations over the last couple of days that a lot of projects needs computing, which hopefully means that they will need Golem, they will use Golem at some point. So how that looks like to us right now, after more than 2 years of experience and building Golem, I think that the fact that maybe the pace of advancement in the computing power slowed down, I believe that this is largely irrelevant right now, at least for us as building Golem. Like people just buy more computers. Of course, with Golem you could mobilize computers that are not used at the moment, and this is still like a pretty cool part of the pitch. But in fact, people are buying more computers. As for cloud computing and how that market is organized, I think that the oligopoly, so lack of competition on that market is exactly where the problem is, but that problem goes well beyond prices. As for in-house infrastructure, I believe that we can help with moving that from the cloud, but this is not really where our strength will be in the future, and companies are like moving to the cloud, like regardless of Web3 or not Web3. In fact, we have to help with that process to make it as Web3, as decentralized as possible. And we still need, of course, the computing component of the decentralized web. So, as I said, I believe that the real problem is with the fact that the user has a very limited control on the cloud as it is right now. And by user, I mean like all the stakeholders, both users who use apps or services, but also developers. Like even if you have full control over your code base, you have full control on what you deploy where, at some point you use someone else's infrastructure, and this is like a sovereignty problem, because you're giving away your sovereignty to the cloud provider. And even worse, there is no auditability, so you do not know what happens next. And with the recent regulations, even in the developed world, I mean, like things like a Cloud Act in US or copyright directive that EU works on right now, it might turn out that not only you are losing your sovereignty to the cloud providers, but also like other parties, governments, international organizations like want to have their part into looking into that, doing with those data, with those processes even, whatever they up to. And that control question is, in fact, essential And of course, if you think about Golem as a very vast network of very different computers with very different capabilities, that's reversing the problem a little bit. So you don't have like 3 or 4 major players anymore, but you have like a real mesh of computers, of data centers, or of individual providers that you can select from and use them. And although you may not necessarily like have a full control of their nodes, of the computers, you do not, obviously, that improves the situation, especially if you add like a few exciting things to that. So to sum up like where the problem with the cloud lies now, I would say that this is in fact UX problem. This is a stakeholders UX problem. And by UX, I don't mean, of course, like a nice graphical interface, but I understand how you are able to interact with the cloud and select the properties you want from the cloud and opt out from the properties that you don't want from the cloud. And in theory, you are able to build your own cloud right now, like using exactly the servers of the parameters you need, with all the technologies you need. Make sure that they have like a trusted execution environment, they are located in a jurisdiction you like, and preferably are also powered by renewables, energy from like a green energy. But at the end of the day, like that UX problem has not been solved yet. And of course, like prices and all that market stuff goes on top of that. So this is, I think, why we need Golem right now. We need Golem for the user-controlled cloud, like a cloud that user can decide like what properties are important, what are not important, what to use, what not to use. And in fact, ability of gathering very different resources of very different types, very different jurisdictions, very different machines, very different data centers. This is exactly where the strong point of a system like Golem lies, because that gives control. And this is like our evolution of the why question, from price to control. And I think that apart from that why question, that also gives us some insights of like what is important and how to get there. I will be very high level here, but happy to discuss that during AMA. So obviously, like to really make a difference, we need to be as universal as possible. So we need arbitrary computing. Admittedly, we are now in a batch processing model, which is basically consequence of our early assumption that the price is important. And the price is especially important when you have a lot of CPU or GPU cycles to run. Now we think that also control is important, and we need to be as universal as possible. But universal setup, it turns out, needs a little bit different set of assumptions than a traditional blockchain environment. Coming to Golem from blockchain space, we've thought about it in a little bit blockchain category. So we always knew, of course, that that computation will happen off-chain. But for example, we had like a difficult time thinking about like what exactly consensus is on the network. And I would say today that we don't have any global consensus. And thinking about arbitrary computing cloud in terms of a global consensus is in fact a mistake. Because if you have like a limited number of interacting parties in every possible, let's call that trait of computing power, you only need local consensus because people who are interacting among each other. Of course, you need them to agree on the fact that the service was provided and paid for and was provided correctly, but that's all what you need. Consequently, you need quiet, relaxed thinking about verification process, about proof of work process, because our world around us, this is one of the things we learned. I think that disrupts physics as well. So listen, world is not deterministic. Like blockchains are deterministic, but world in general is non-deterministic. So it is very hard to provide robust verification, robust proof of work for everything you want to do. There are use cases that, of course, this is possible, but also that there are also use cases where this is not possible. And I think that the fact that world in general is non-deterministic is one of the important findings for us in building that kind of system. So I'm pretty sure that if we want to have decentralized cloud-like computing, we are not able to find like a one single solution for verification of the results. That, of course, implies that we need not very monolithic design that will cover all possible use cases, but we need flexible platform with adding specific solutions for specific types of things you want to do. And this is exactly what we are doing right now in Golem. Recently, we have launched a subset of Golem, which is called Golem Unlimited, very flexible thing you can use in your intranet to compute anything and act as a single provider to outside world. Also, in that thinking, we also enabled GPU computing for specific use cases, and we are working towards more generalized, more robust solutions in the future. But we don't think anymore that this is possible to, for example, have one verification algorithm that will cover all possible things that we want to build in the future on Golem. And even more importantly, we want all the people, including you here, host on Golem, run on Golem, integrate with Golem. As a summary, I think there is one more important finding, and I know that everyone keeps repeating that here over the last 3 days, but still I thought that this is important, so I will repeat that as well, that we really need to improve usability dramatically as an industry, as Golem, but also as other projects in that space. Because although we are creating quite exciting stuff, I hope it is quite exciting stuff, it is still hard to use, even for people from our space. And I believe that if we want to really make world a better place, we need to make sure that that world will use what we build. Thank you very much.